This old smoke-filled bar is something I'm not used to, but I gave up.
Hello, everybody. Laura was my student in advanced. Lara! I used to have that problem in the classroom, too. Lara was my student in advanced comp and critical thinking at Sacramento City College. And I'm happy to say that later she and I became friends. But today I'm going to talk to her about her as a student. My experience of Lara in the classroom is that she was a brightly burning intellect. She was fierce and noble and dedicated and driven. She was everything that you want in a student and more. Actually, the course title is a very apt description of Lara, Advanced Composition. She came to the class with a masterful ability to write, probably from her experiences as a comedian. I taught argumentative writing. There aren't a lot of opportunities for humor in argumentative writing, but Laura found them. And Lara found them, sorry. I'm glad you're not taking me off the stage here. And her experiences as a poet showed as well. It was as if every word in every essay had been considered carefully. No word shouldn't be there. It was amazing. Critical thinking. It almost seemed by nature that Lara was a critical thinker. She was not timid. She was not afraid. And yet, or I shouldn't say yet, and she always considered diverse perspectives and scrutinized everything very deeply. I guess my favorite memory of Lara in the classroom was one time when we were working on deductive reasoning exercises, and one group had gone up and put their answer to the problem on the board, and it just wasn't quite accurate. And I glanced over and I could see Lara, and she was practically levitating out of her seat. And I knew she had the answer, and she knew she had the answer. And, finally the group was done doing it wrong. And I called on Lara, and she rushed to the blackboard, picked up the chalk, diagrammed the problem, explained it just beautifully to everyone, even the people who were struggling with it, and it was a moment of triumph. But what I really noticed is that normally if one student shows herself to be brighter than everybody else, there's a certain maybe resentment. But that wasn't the way that Lara's expertise was treated. It was obvious that the other students who liked her so well, very likable person, were triumphant for her. So that shows a lot about her. I loved having Lara in my class, but I loved even more reading her essays. Some of you might have seen Crash, a film about racial and social strife in Los Angeles. Lara wrote an argumentative essay about Crash that became for me a model argumentative essay, one that I used throughout the remainder of my teaching career to illustrate good writing to all my students. I wish I had time to read the entire essay to you because it definitely showcases Lara's ability with words, with thinking. But time has forced me to choose a few sections. I'm going to begin with the opening paragraphs. The essay is called Monochrome, Crash and the Black and White Divide. Tandy Newton's performance in the film Crash is painful to watch. See, she is funny. And there's nothing like a good opening sentence to grab your attention. I'm speaking not only of the obvious discomfort produced by the molestation scene, I am also uncomfortable seeing Tandy Newton, an actor with rich and complicated cultural heritage, reduced to the cinema cliche of the light-skinned, semi-privileged, upper-class American black woman. I know that Paul Haggis intended to make a statement with much of his casting. The rapper Chris Ludacris Bridges as the hip-hop denouncing thief, the famously nice Sandra Bullock as a shrill, castrated bigot. But watching the British Zimbabwean Newton play this character is unsettling, in part because of the larger reality her portrayal denies. Haggis's casting of Newton implies a denial of, or blindness to, perspectives beyond the traditional American fight between black and white. I do not mean to suggest that Crash flagrantly excludes other ethnicities. Haggis makes efforts to be inclusive, to tell the whole story of racial strife in Los Angeles. He fails not because of malice or even carelessness, but because of timidity and perhaps habit. Crash, like the American society it strives to portray, is simply too obsessed with the black versus white divide to do justice to any other perspectives. This American obsession with black and white excludes all other races and cultures from the discussion, forcing those who are not either, or not exclusively either, to pick a side instead of developing truer, more complicated perspectives. Fans of the film might claim that at least two other perspectives were clearly presented. One of the major plots revolved around conflict between Daniel, a Hispanic locksmith, and Farhad, an Iranian shopkeeper. Their conflict is credible, and Daniel is one of the most likable characters in the film. The scene in which he gives his daughter an imaginary cloak of invincibility is particularly touching. The problem lies in the difference between the film's black or white characters and characters of other races. While the black detective, Graham Waters, and the white police officer, John Ryan, are recognizably, messily human, Daniel and Farhad are flat, one-note characters. Daniel is a good guy, a good father, and probably a good locksmith. He is good. Thank you, that's one of my very favorite lines. I just, for someone like Laura, I'm for an editorial, Lara, who is so good with language, to repeat such a simple word, good, 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 it just shows how good she was. He is good. He is not much else. Farhad may have some interesting character traits. Unfortunately, we never get to see them. He is so consumed with rage for almost all of his time on screen that he never displays any of his hypothetical complexity. The treatment of these two characters is particularly stunning in a film that allows one of its characters, John Ryan, to be so despicable as to molest a woman at a traffic stop, yet so brave as to risk his life to save her from a flaming car wreck. So Laura goes on to develop,
I can go all day.
For those of you who snuck in flasks, this has become a drinking game.
Apparently I can too. That's the unfortunate part. Lara goes on to develop her thesis and argue her point in an equally convincing style. She ends her essay with a call to action, a strong call to action from a strong woman. She writes, "I am an Asian American. I do not want to have to choose sides in an argument already in progress, or worse, have a side chosen for me because of my situation. The American divide between black and white is complex, contentious, and entirely worthy of a film like Crash that is entirely devoted to the subject. But other realities exist that are just as complex, just as contentious, just as worthy. It is time to give them their due."